Is that people are able to have a satisfying and safe sexual life, and that they have the capacity to reproduce and the freedom to decide if, when, and how often to do so. Reproductive health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity in all matters relating to the reproductive system and to its functions and processes. Women's sexual and reproductive health is related to multiple human rights, including the right to life, the right to be free from torture, the right to health, the right to privacy, the right to education, and the prohibition of discrimination. The Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights and the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women have both clearly indicated that women's right to health includes their sexual and reproductive health. This means that states have obligations to respect, protect, and fulfill rights related to women's sexual and reproductive health. Not only does protecting the reproductive rights of women gives couples the ability to decide when and how many children to have, but according to research, it is the most effective means of empowering women.
Maybe if when I say reproductive health is at the center, at the same time, I prefer to see it in relation to other women rights issues. First comes reproductive health, as I said, maybe specifically you can say family planning for women to have the choice when to have children and how many. That's very basic. And then together with that, women's rights to property, because in many countries, they may not be even allowed to own land. And women's rights to equal opportunity, to jobs, employment opportunity, which is key because they can contribute greatly to economic development. And then rights to even political involvement, starting from the grassroots in the parliament and so on, and then rights related to education and so on. So when you see reproductive health in relation to these all rights, then you can have actually a better impact, be it food security, which is actually the minimum, to even one's country's economic progress and prosperity. Because you cannot really shut off 50% of the workforce that can contribute to the economic growth. As I said, I support, I care because it's good for the country. And the other issue is it can also be related to climate, reproductive health easily, and to environment. Because with population growth, what can happen to the environment, and then as a result, what can happen to the climate, and then what can happen to this small world that seemingly looks really big. And then the other factor, the education, that can be also linked with reproductive health.
Despite international laws and the clear economic and social benefits, the violation of women's sexual and reproductive health and rights are frequent. These take many forms, including denial of access to services that only women require, poor quality services, forced sterilization, forced virginity examinations, and forced abortion without women's prior consent, female genital mutilation, and early marriage. Nearly half the women and adolescent girls in developing countries are denied the right to decide whether or not to have sex with their partners, use contraception, or seek health care, according to a report by the United Nations. While the progress that has been achieved and women's rights over the past 25 years has contributed to reducing poverty and hunger and improving education and health globally, some 650 million women are married as children, and every day more than 500 women and girls die during pregnancy and childbirth, according to United Nations report in November 2019.
Because that's important. I think another commitment we've made very clearly is that we will use every opportunity possible to ensure that people understand that development cannot take place without sexual and reproductive health and rights of its people. And so centering that in all the discourses, and particularly on the movement around ensuring universal health coverage. country after country has a movement to ensure that everybody gets access to health and quality health. And we feel that fundamental to achieving that means you have to achieve health for young people and women who many times don't get that coverage because they're not able to afford it. And therefore, we're going to put sexual and reproductive health central to the universal health coverage agenda.
The rapid expansion of infrastructures in Ethiopia, including healthcare and education, has meant that women in Tigray are making healthier and more informed decisions for their own well-being and the well-being of their family.
It makes sense actually when you go down to the family. After we have started this very aggressive family planning program in Ethiopia, women started to have more time to be involved in economic activities. And we had a focus group discussion with men, and one of the men was saying, he told us, initially I used to oppose family planning, but now I fully support, because my wife has more time to work not even far away from home, but in her compound, keeping honeybee, small irrigation to grow vegetables, and earn some money. So there was one person, a breadwinner in that home, in that family, and because of family planning, she got more time and she started to become a breadwinner. And less children, less mouths to feed, so more quality of life in the family. This is how the husband himself witnessed the change. And above all, he said, with less children, I'm having more attention. Because he didn't need to compete with many children, which is correct. Something that he understood in a very simplified way.
The conflict in Tigray that has targeted essential basic services, including health facilities, has meant that much of these gains have now been lost. The destruction of health facilities, an all-encompassing siege on the region that has blocked off fuel and put Tigray under a complete communications blackout, has meant that the violence inflicted on women during the 8 months-long occupation of the region by hostile forces is largely underreported. A report from Insecurity Insight noted that nearly a third of survivors were threatened with a further violence if they sought help or reported the assaults, providing a powerful incentive to keep quiet. There have also been threats against those who are providing care and drawing attention to war-related sexual violence. Insecurity Insight reported that a therapist providing care to a survivor was also threatened with a violence if he attempted to identify Eritrean soldiers as the perpetrators of this attack. The systematic and deliberate destruction of health facilities, the depletion of medicine and medical supplies in Tigray due to the total blockade has made life of women in Tigray almost impossible. Access to basic sanitary pads, contraceptives, abortion pills is limited or expensive to purchase due to the siege.